So, hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Alexis Eaglin. In case you haven't joined us before, I'm a HubSpot certified trader here on the Simple Strat team. So I am just here to essentially welcome you to the Flywheel Fuel series. So this is designed for really just like giving you everything that you need to make sure that you're able to build awareness, generate leads, and create the fuel to power your marketing, sales, and service goals. So be sure to check us out, keep updates with me and Allie so that you don't miss out on future sessions. Took a break for a little bit, but we're back on schedule now. Today's agenda, we are going over like I said, most asked questions that I get as a HubSpot specialist every week, and it's about sequences and how to make them effective. Also, just like measuring the success of it, different use cases, when to use sequences versus marketing emails, drips, and things like that. And of course, feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A, and we will answer them at the end. Just a couple of housekeeping things for you. So like I said, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. We'll answer them at the end. But this is being recorded, so you will get that recording sent to you in 1 to 2 days, depending on how long it takes for us to get the edits out. But you'll have that sent to you so you can share that as an additional resource. And then some of the things that we might talk about might be outside of your tier. So just make note of that. And if you have questions on anything, feel free to let us know. And then how we can help you as a HubSpot solutions partner, we help you with anything from buying HubSpot if you are like still kind of considering what that looks like for you, possible upgrades there, making sure you guys get the best product mix for the right price. We can help you with strategy as well. So implementing things that we are talking about today, fixing messy HubSpot portals, general training, and lots of education as well. So feel free to join us for any questions and things at simplestrat.com/consult. All right, that is it for me. I know everyone is dying in anticipation to see what kind of tricks and tips we have for sequences. So I will pass things over to Ali Schwanke and she will take over.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Alexis. And for everybody who's jumping in just now, we do have the Q&A is live. We don't have the chat down yet. So if you have any questions there, feel free to throw them in. We already have one that is about the differences between sequences and emails. So you're in luck because we're going to cover that and more. So let's go ahead and jump in. I know in our monthly webinars that are related to our HubSpot product updates, Tyler goes over all the content and talks a mile a minute. There's so much to cover, and I am not any different. We're going to go a mile a minute here. But the goal is, you know what? I've been to a boring webinar, and this is not going to be one of those. So our goal is to get as many insights and as many takeaways from this as possible. So we're going to cover beginner all the way to advanced and a lot of tips and tricks in between, plus some questions that came in from people over email because I'm so excited. Got lots and lots of responses to that email. So we're going to dig in there as well. Okay, so for the purposes of sequences, let's do a quick definition here and let's make sure that we understand what's being talked about. So when we talk about HubSpot sequences, first of all, this isn't on a slide anywhere, but I'm just going to say you do need Pro or Enterprise in order to send sequences on HubSpot, unless you happen to be one of the very, very lucky people that got sequences back in a legacy version of Sales Starter. Yeah, that happened for a little while. Boohoo, doesn't happen anymore. So if you happen to have Pro or Enterprise, if you don't have Pro and you looked at it before and it was super expensive, all that pricing's changed as well. So please, 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 if you want to take advantage of this and you don't have that, reach out to us. We'll help you get that into your portal and get set up. So, all right, moving on. So sequences do not replace one-to-one outreach. And we're going to talk about when to use each because there's a very specific way you want to use sequences. And thing to keep in mind is at the end of our emails, at the end of the sequences, we have people. We're actually talking to people, not just contacts. So do make sure that we think about this, and we'll talk about actually how to build one-to-one into your sequences too. The good thing is a sequence should let the automation think for you. So the thing that I like to say is sequences help you remain focused on the people that need to have communication going out to them to nurture them or warm them or force an action, but they don't need your mental load every single day. And then as your business grows, it's harder to keep track of the outgoing and incoming activities. I can tell you right now, I've worked with folks to set up sequences and they're like, yeah, I would like a task every 3 days. That's great for the first 30 people. And then what happens when you enroll 30 more and then 30 more, and then suddenly you've got all these tasks you can't accomplish because they keep piling on top of each other, right? So we're going to talk about mitigating some of that here. Now, the things that you have access to in the HubSpot sequences is these specific actions. So when we say sequences, we're thinking automated emails, manual email tasks, Call tasks, we're using the word task in here. This is the HubSpot language. If you go into Knowledge Center, it will say this. General tasks, this could be anything. Send them a cookie, call them, like you probably want to use the call cast, but general can be a catch-all if you want to. And then the in-mail is the word for LinkedIn in-mail. And then connection request is LinkedIn connection. Now, we have lots and lots of questions about how to use LinkedIn and HubSpot together. We're not going to dive deep into that in this webinar. We did cover it in a previous webinar. If you want to go and find that, there is a lot of challenge around automating this in HubSpot sequences with LinkedIn. If you don't have the souped up, all the way built out version of HubSpot, which is known as Enterprise, that's where that LinkedIn functionality lives to automate it, but we're most likely not going to dig into that too far today. So if you have questions, we can tackle them at the end, or we might be able to get some of that here as we walk through. So to use the illustration of how I think you should go into this, one of my favorite books, if anybody happened to grow up in the 80s or 90s, this is one of my favorite book series, the Choose Your Own Adventure. And the way that you think about this is each page in this book, again, we used to read physical books, it's shocking, but you would actually then find an ending based on where you want it to go. So it'd say turn to page 55 or turn to page 23 if you want to go to Mars. So in this book, you are making choices that determine the main character's actions and the plot's outcome. And if you think about sequences, you are using a series of steps. And if they do this or if they don't do this, you are determining your contacts or your people's actions and the potential outcome of that relationship. So, what I like to think of sequences as a choose your own adventure, and there's only one right way. And I found this on Reddit. There's only one right way to read a choose your own adventure book, and it's with your fingers in all the alternative endings, which is yes. When you're building a sequence, you need to think about all the alternative endings of your sequence. And this is where sequences become so powerful because the best sequences start on a whiteboard, which we will get to. And I've got some AI tips for you there to actually make that easier. So again, if you think about sequences as choose your own adventure, as opposed to a systematic, specific way to get things out, this could probably sum up the entire HubSpot experience, but I want you to use that mindset going in today. What everybody wants to know. So when everybody sent in their questions about today's webinar, what were they wanting to know? What's working? How many touches does it take? How many messages are too much? Should we use LinkedIn as part of our sequences? Do you do A/B testing? Do you do dynamic sequences? Or they're not really static sequences. They're just called, let's say, like the normal sequences. Probably shouldn't use the word static there. And then do you do just emails or calls? Or do you do a combination of stuff? Okay. So everybody wants to know these things. And unfortunately, the answer is it depends. And I'm going to give you some best practices to think about. And I believe that the world we live in is there are some best practices we need to follow and adhere to. But if you look at your industry, so for instance, if you're in SaaS, there are very specific formulas of outreach that have worked for BDRs. Go find some of those and put those to work. If you're in services businesses, it's going to be difficult to solicit interest in a service when you're trying to sell human trust. That's hard, but there is cases where that does work. Go find out what those are. I've got some ideas if you want to ask those in Q&A, but again, like this is where we can also help clients with strategy. So anyway, I will give you some guidelines to live by. One, there's no one right way to use email sequences. So if it's like, Ali, I came here today thinking I need the one way. Well, the one way is probably start using them. I'll tell you, there are lots of wrong ways to use them. And we're going to talk through what this looks like because it actually has a lot to do with how you use them in HubSpot. So let's go ahead and dive in. And oh, you know what? Before we dive in, my favorite friend over on Reddit, I'm not sure who HubSpot Sherpa is, but I like them because you're always going to get some people who are upset when you use sequences, especially if you use them as part of outbound sales. I had an outbound sequence you guys go on one day, and literally the same day that it was going, I had this, yeah, I'm so excited to talk to you. Let's set up a time to call with go to hell. You guys are terrible. I don't even know what you're doing. Like that same email came in the same day. So thick skin, important in sales, but at the same time, remember that you're not going to please everybody. Just make sure you don't. Relevancy and data is important, which we'll talk about. Okay, the most important question of the day, if you are a HubSpot user, sequences versus templates versus marketing emails. What is the difference? Did you even know there was a difference? Shocking. Let's go there. All right, so when we say sequence, we're referring to the sequence tool inside of HubSpot. So in your menu, over on the left, you got this little automation icon. These are the automations you have access to, and sequences lives right there. When you set up a sequence with an automated email, it looks like this. when you're managing your sequences, this is the screen it looks like. So this is what we're referring to when we say sequence. Now, why is that so important? Well, probably after this webinar, you're going to go Google some stuff or chat GPT some stuff, and you're going to ask about email sequences. Well, when you're researching online or listening to a podcast, watching a video, whatever, email sequences often refers to just any emails sent in a row. Okay. So where this comes into play is, and I have to give you my fancy graphic here because I needed to use the Miami Dolphins in some way. So you have a conversion, and all of a sudden you've got just email, 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 email. Now, this could be the conversion over here could be they booked a demo, and these might be drip sequences in the HubSpot sequences tool that reminds them to come to the demo if they didn't show up. Or this could be downloaded ebook, and then this email might be a marketing email using a workflow in HubSpot, sent one to many to give them other pieces of content. So just because this sequence of activity exists doesn't mean that we're always talking about HubSpot sequences. So for the purposes of today, we're going to talk about HubSpot sequences, but it is important to remember the differences. And I have a table here to show you to break that down. So let's actually dig into that. So which one is which? So sales sequences are what is in the Sales Pro and Sales Enterprise. I forgot the word enterprise here. In the Sales Enterprise tool, it is limited to you get 10 automated emails in that you can add tasks, you can add calls, but the automated emails are limited to 10. You could space those out over a couple of months. You could space them out over 10 days, whatever. 500 sends a day per user for Pro and 1,000 for Enterprise. Also, quick tip, if you happen to be on the sales or the admin side of things, you can actually configure sending limits so you don't end up bumping against that because you got to send some other emails besides just those emails every day. So this might be a good thing to do. And then a contact can only be in one sequence at one time. So if you think about use case here, if someone comes in and they don't show up for a demo and you want to get them into a demo and they're in a sequence, but then you also want to send them a sequence about your upcoming webinar, you can't do that. You can only be in one sequence at a time. Sales email templates are what sequences are made up of. This is starting to get confusing at all. It's made up of email templates and they're one-off sends, or you can put them into your sequence building blocks. You can still measure metrics, which I'll show you here shortly, but this is really good if you have just like Tyler and I both use these in our sales process. We have an email that goes out to someone after we met with them on a sales call. It summarizes our sales call, gives them some next steps, next actions. That's a sales email template. It doesn't belong in a sequence because we're not using it in a sequence, but we could if we found a use case for it. Marketing emails are sent one to many. They're set up in the marketing email function over in HubSpot. And the way they become automated is a type of email in HubSpot. So automated marketing emails, they're typically used for more of a branded or a designed experience. You can strip out any of the, HTML and make them come across as more of a person-to-person email, but the way they're delivered is still one to many through this email sending domain through HubSpot. What that means, kind of like to dumb it down, is sales sequences look like they came from a person. When an email client and a server's running, marketing emails look like they came from a company. Okay, that's kind of the easiest way to think about it. These are powered by automated emails and workflows, and a contact can get an email quote unquote drip through a nurture through workflows and also be enrolled in a sequence. So that's kind of how to use these interchangeably. Typically, when you're looking at what you want to do with sequences and in marketing emails, it comes down to the campaign you're running, the types of people you're communicating to, what sort of history they have with you. We'll talk about that here as we move along. All right, so how we're going to distinguish the use of sequences here today is we're going to talk about them being one-to-one. They're going to be coming from a person, so they're coming from Alexis, not from SimpleStrat. They're typically short in nature. You're not sending giant books of information. They're not newsletters. They're short emails. They're designed to educate, engage, or compel action. Now, this is what I want you to think about when you put together sequences, because I did get a lot of questions about like, well, what should we put in sequences and how do we write them? I do think that the biggest miss that a lot of sequences that I've like, if you have a sequence you want me to look at or our team to look at, fire it over, enroll me in it and be like, hey, just heads up. Because I see a lot of like compelling action, but there isn't anything else there besides that. So it's, you're going to the bar and you're getting asked, hey, do you want to go on a date? Go on a date, go on a date. Buy me a drink first. Let's figure that out. So I think this is what we're talking to people at the end. Sequences, as we distinguished it today, again, made up of email templates. That's kind of our system. And then they're deployed either at the organization level. So you might be doing a This would be enterprise. A sequence is for people that got stuck at a specific part. They're still coming from a person, or Alexis may be entitled or empowered to put people in sequences when she feels as a sales rep fit that they need to then be activated. So how this then breaks down is really based on your strategy. All right, before we jump into the best practices, real quick, do know your landscape. So this is no knock on HubSpot specifically, because we love HubSpot. We love their sequences tool. However, go to the Googles and type in how like the best email sequences. And this is the email. This is what comes up. This is on page one. And page one says, this is the email sequence that earned us $100,000 in 30 days. Okay. Sorry, HubSpot, but this is from 2015. Just for a minute, anybody remember the phone they were using in 2015? Probably not, because we want to forget it like it's the plague. So advice from 2015 about email sequences is tough, because a lot of what used to work isn't working now. A lot of the things we have available to us, the amount of AI noise in sequences has absolutely crushed results for a lot of us that were doing more generic things. Now we have to be really specific. So the other thing to think about here is a lot of the emails, sequences, blogs, articles, videos, that kind of stuff were written for SaaS and product companies. So if you're a service company or you're selling an intricate product to a very sophisticated audience, an info product, e-commerce, whatever, your use case will probably look wildly different, and how it works and what's effective may be different. So be careful taking advice from, not saying like, again, we're talking best practices, we're not talking industry specific, but if it's like 17 touches or 15 touches or 10 automated emails, take that with a grain of salt, because a lot of this is written for SaaS. All right. So best practices, how to think about moving into a sequence. That it's always going to start with strategy and segmentation. So I actually have, at the end of this webinar, I have steps that I want you to walk through when you put your sequence together. And the first thing, shocker, is strategy. The second one is going to be setup and content, because you can't really set up what you need to set up without thinking about step one. And you definitely can't set up things if you don't have content to talk about. I'll tell you, one of the common challenges that both Alexis and myself and other consultants on our team face is, hey, we want you to put together a sequence, Alexis, and we want you to do it to this segment of people, and we want them to book a meeting. And the next question she says is, great, what do you want to say in those? And the question is, what should we say in those? And she's like, I don't know, what content do you have? Oh, and it stops right there. So you have to think about what content you have to bring them to the point where they want to actually converse with you. And then obviously step three is tracking and adjusting. The other way to think about this is in, oh, you know what? I had to get this in here because so this is how to think about it. It's the three steps. How we tend to think about it. I forgot to put the slide in here. How we tend to think about it is like, the sequence is ready, evil laugh and press. Okay. This is not actually how this works. If anything, I know Will hears me out here on my team one time. You hit press and then all of a sudden you get a bunch of error messages. Okay. That's not fun. I've gotten that before. Or you get a bunch of out of office replies. Okay. Hitting the go button is important, but it's actually not really what sequences are all about. They're much more about these three things. So one, your success of sequences is going to vary based on job role. Who is using the sequences? Are these BDRs? Are these sales pros? Are these account managers? What type of people are they reaching out to? And what does their buying journey look like? So if your industry largely based their buying decision on referrals and social proof, cold outreach is going to be difficult for you to command something there. So you might need to switch to inviting people to an upcoming event with your cold outreach versus asking for a meeting. And that also dovetails into the actions asked of a contact. So again, we're all three of these things, like these are really good things to bring to your team when you're talking about using sequences in any way or shape or form, and have people think critically through these, because this is going to vary wildly based on the industry you're in and what you're asking your audience to do. So let's talk about the best practices for effective sequences. There's several here, and we've got some additional color under each. So number one, this isn't a surprise. We talk about this all the time. Have a goal. You definitely have to have a goal. Each of the email sequences needs to have a clear goal. We'll talk about a variety of goals and ideas and use cases you can choose from, but it also helps you guide the content and what your cadence should be. So if you are educating an audience, for example, and you're dripping out 10 articles or pieces of content, you're not going to drip them out over 10 days. We barely get a chance to go through our own email every day and clean it out, let alone get new stuff in there. So that might be once a week for 10 weeks. So again, that's going to have implications on your goal. Second of all, having it be personalized and relevant. And I don't mean, "Hi, Alexis, we're both women. Let's talk." Okay, that's not personalized. And gone are the days where just having that personalization token. I know this when I get an email like, "Hi, Allie, as an owner at Simple Strat in Lincoln, Nebraska, home of the Huskers." And I was like, good job filling in your database and filling in. Like, if you were actually going to personalize the first message to me, it would be like, OMG, I can't believe they pulled off that win last weekend. I'm a big, whatever team fan you are. Again, I like sports. But if you do that, there's a smart way to do that, and then there's a not smart way to do that. I'm saying don't do the not smart way. But tailored to the interests and needs of your recipient, segmentation is critical. This is where we see the most opportunity for improvement, quite frankly, is better segmentation, better content. Like those two things solve a lot of problems. And this doesn't just mean, again, like just because Alexis and I are both women does not mean we have the same shared interests, maybe about how we want to build our careers or what we enjoy in our spare time. So the more you know about your content, contacts, which again, it goes back to your whole tech stack, the better you are. I already said this. These are not personalized. These are just free fills. And then think of the big three. This is where your content comes from in segmentation. Does your content solve a problem, answer a question, or head on a pain point? So, and pain points can't be, even for us, like I challenge our team sometimes, like a pain point's like, yeah, HubSpot's messy, but the pain point is actually, I had a call the other day that was perfect. HubSpot's a mess, which means they can't get the reports, and the board is breathing down their neck to be able to share that information publicly. Okay, now we've got a pain point that we're solving. Do you struggle to get reports together quickly so that you look good in front of the board? Okay, that's a pain point, right? So think about that as you put together your sequences. All right, mobile first. We are now should not have to say this again, but mobile first, mobile first. I love sending myself my own emails and seeing how many scrolls does it take and how quickly can I see what the email is about. We're now also moving to an environment. We're not there yet, but Apple is releasing AI summaries at the top of emails. You guys, this is going to change the game for email, period. I don't know exactly how that's going to change for HubSpot email sequences, but I imagine we're going to have to keep our eyes and ears open of that. 70% of our emails are read on mobile. Again, what's short on desktop? I've been shocked at myself when I sent an email and I was like, wow, that looks short. It was actually really long on mobile. We'll dig into this later. Have a clear call to action. And it's not always booking a meeting. So if you want, this is where I really like to dig into the use of AI. Like, what are some ways I could ask for action here that are not booking a meeting? So some things we've used in the past: explore the guide, watch the video, ask them a question. Like you probably got one this week about this webinar. What do you want to learn? Invite them to search something, find us on YouTube, email, stop by the booth, again, so on and so forth. Too many times this booking a meeting is kind of just the like, I don't know what else to ask them, so let's ask them for a meeting. I don't know what to ask them, so let's ask them to get married. Okay, let's tone it down a little bit and ask for some sort of an engagement here before we go for the kill. And then these are really good things to A/B test. I ran a sequence this last week where I put like the subject line was the same, the intro was the same, but there was two calls to action instead of one. And so does that mean that there's a call to action above the content? How does that play out? So you can put that to the test as well. Good testing practices. This this also is really important because when I hear our sequences aren't working, and I'll ask, great, how are you testing them? What do you mean? Or we'll go into a testing environment, and any good test has one variable, and it's tested against or one control and one variable. So thankfully, HubSpot A/B testing inside of sequences now makes that possible. But then naming your sequences and naming your templates becomes a big deal. So if you haven't yet really dug into A/B testing, I'm also shocked at the number of times I say A/B testing and someone says they're doing it and I dig into it and they're not really doing it well. Go study actually how it works. What does it mean? How do you do it effectively? And if this is something you're trying to get better at, feel free to reach out and we can give you some tips there as well. It's always a work in progress. As a person running the sequences or reporting this to your management or your superiors or anything, always communicate what you're learning and what you're testing. Because I think one of the challenges I've seen in both my career, in our team, as well as our clients is executive leaders, especially those that are not in the doing, often dig into, they often want, oh, I actually have this. They want definity and they want certainty. And so what happens is, and I know Alexis, you've gotten this too, where someone in an executive role who's not the doing reads an article, says, Alexis, we need to start doing all of this. Go set all of this up in our portal. And the case is like, it's not quite that clear. So we need to start talking about, again, doing, testing, sharing, and repeat. That's actually fundamental to all marketing, but That's my perspective. So if you want to screenshot that, this is your best practices checklist for setting up sequences. We'll talk about deliverability here in a minute, but this is our checklist. So one, do I have a well-defined goal for sequences? Is it personalized and relevant? Does this solve a problem, answer a question, or hit on pain points? Is it written with a mobile first mindset? Is there a clear call to action? Am I good following testing, or am I following good testing practices? And am I documenting what we're doing and what we're learning? So now that we've got that checklist, we're going to go into battle, which the battle is the inbox. So that's what we're up against. So this is what I feel like when I send a sequence. I test it, it looks great and amazing. And then I forget that the average executive inbox looks like this. So this is not my slide. This is compliments of Jason Bay. He posted this on LinkedIn a while ago. I've screenshotted it, used it multiple times. And all of a sudden it's like, whoa, okay. Have you noticed if I just read through this, this is my favorite thing to do is open up someone's, even if you go in your spam filter, open your spam filter and take note of the patterns that you're seeing in the stuff that just doesn't resonate. The stuff that goes past your inbox, the stuff that gets stuck in your spam filter. For me, I know I find a lot of understanding when I share my inbox as an executive. I'm going to come back to this in a second. This is my inbox, and you'll notice that I have and a lot of these, I don't know any of these people, but a lot of these email, when I get an outreach, I don't delete it. It actually goes into a folder called cold outreach examples. Literally, that's where it goes. And I love bringing these up because I was sharing this with my husband last night and I said, love your SaaS. Okay, first of all, that's kind of funny, but I don't have a SaaS product. And secondly, like, I don't know who a Mayor R is that looks like junk, right? So I think there's a lot of ways that people are taught to get our attention and it might get an open, but it backfires. Knock, knock. Nope, not going to work. No, not answering any emails from people that say knock, knock. I've had one that said, oops, Allie, I did it again. You know, there's just all sorts of things. But what happens, and this is data from Lavender, is when someone, so this is quote per their blog, when someone scans their inbox, they engage their mental spam filter to determine which emails to open, ignore, or delete. You guys, this is your subconscious brain. You do it, I do it, our contacts do it, our prospects do it. It's the subconscious mental spam filter that exists, PS, in addition to the regular spam filter. So a subject line that triggers mental spam sends it straight to the trash. It's important to think that we as people go to our email and think, actually, let me go to my next slide. We think about, do I know this person? Do I recognize the name? Do I recognize the company? And would someone actually use that subject line if they know me or knew me? So I'm not saying that cold outreach doesn't work. What I'm saying is most of the time, the techniques that are being taught for lots and lots and lots and lots of people with the hope that a few respond, and they're using these kind of I don't know, tactics to just get you to open. But even in the case now where email opens aren't as reliable as they once were because of Apple Mail, the battle is even harder. So this is also a further play for, in addition to running sequences, if you haven't yet talked about what I call air cover for your marketing, not covering that in this webinar, but that's the importance of brand and recognition in the industry. So if someone does get your email and it comes through and it says Alexis from Simple Strat right here, at least they've heard of us before. So let's go into, oh, you know what? The last piece I wanted to toss out here is something that's really helped me as both a leader, as someone that does email sequences for my company, is go and get some outside perspective. So I have someone in the industry that I'm looking to sell to, and I say, hey, would you mind sharing your inbox with me? Could I just take a quick peek? And I look at the inbox and it gets me perspective on how they monitor their email and manage their day. And then I say, tell me, what do you like? Looks like you didn't open that email. Why? And I have them give me some feedback. That's really, really interesting. And if you haven't done that, I would say give that a shot because that's really going to help you. So email deliverability, this is something that we've have a question in the chat, which we'll get to here at the end, but deliverability is definitely one of those things that today is certainly hard to understand. And there's a couple of points here that I'm going to bring out. We're not going to go deep into deliverability, but I will touch on a couple of things that are really, really important depending on where you are in your journey. If you do plan on sending large volumes of emails to cold contacts, they don't know you got their information from somewhere, you built the list by hand, you probably do want to set up alternative domains. Again, we're not covering that here, so you don't harm your primary sending domain. The last thing you need as a business is for your current domain to have a bunch of spam reports on it. It gets blacklisted, and suddenly your emails as a company don't get delivered, period, because you had some nefarious activity going on in your outreach efforts. If you haven't done this yet and you are doing a lot of volume of outreach and sequences, you do want to set up Google Postmaster tools. This is something that we've done for our clients and helping them as well. You do actually get to see deliverability inside of the marketing email tool. That's something that's still a challenge to stay in the sequences tool. So apologies to my inability to get the HubSpot product team to change that personally, but maybe someday. You do want to make sure that your email domains are warmed up. So this, and again, goes back to this. We're not going to cover email domain warming, but again, if you just bought a bunch of contacts, which again, you shouldn't do anyway, but if you want to email all of them out of HubSpot, please talk to us before you try to do this, because we've fixed and seen too many challenges and errors here that I would say caution, caution, caution before you just jump in. And then you do want to have a cleaning and segmentation practice within your HubSpot admin or ops area to deal with outdated contacts, unsubscribes. It's inevitable. It's going to happen where you have someone that says, hey, this person isn't at this company anymore. Or you get a bunch of bounces because, again, they're gone. What do you do with that if someone's not responsible for taking those contacts at the end of those sequences or in the middle when that's happening and actually doing something with them in your HubSpot? And then lastly, know the habits of your market. So my husband works in sales where he's actually selling to schools, and it's interesting because he is using a lot of outbound in his sales efforts, but he's also finding that in his industry in education they have a lot of gatekeepers and they have a lot of ICT security and compliance. So getting past cybersecurity, a lot of times, like if he calls first and says he's going to send an email and then enrolls them in the sequence, that's much different because they have that relationship first. So think about this, because more and more companies are putting up those safeguards to say, hey, I don't want email from an external domain even coming into our company, and it's marked as like giant external. Again, something you need to keep in mind, and probably good to have a peer to talk to about that as well. Okay, now that we covered the best practices, let's go into ideas and use cases. So the first idea, again, I'm going to cover this because it tends to be on the top of everybody's mind, and that is what we call cold email, cold outreach. The purposes of this, typically, if I see it in the EO forum, the Vistage forum, the YPO forum, it's everybody who wants to generate new leads from a market. They bought a list. I want to hire a lead gen company to do cold sequences. All right, here's the deal. There wouldn't be so many people that were looking for companies that did that because the previous companies were terrible if it was that effective. So I'm just going to say that right now, like there's a lot of people here that have tried this and failed. There's people that have done this well, but they've figured out the targeting, the messaging, and the testing in order to actually make it work. So that's going to be point number one. But number two, if you're looking at testing this out, again, happy to share some things that have worked for me. But one, clear and direct subject lines. None of this cutesy stuff. I don't believe in that. Personally, I don't think it works, but clear and direct subject lines. Number two, clear and relevant targeting. You have to have a reason why you're reaching out, and it can't just be because you're both guys or you're both women. You can't do that. That doesn't work. You need to address key pain points. If you have the language your audience uses, like this is the best case for AI, take 10 of your Fathom calls recordings or 10 of your Sybil call recordings, AI, whatever, throw them into a synthesizer and have it produce. Here's the pain points that we heard in the last 10 sales calls. Boom, that's going to be your pain points you put into your sequences. Definitely provide something of value. You have to have a you first, not me first mentality. Keep them short and sweet. And then keep in mind that you're hoping to hit 3 to 5% of the market that is buying right now. 95% or more of your market is not in market to buy your services right now, which is why this is so challenging. Because if you're hoping to burst it out of a cannon and find the few people that are out looking for your services right now, the good chance of it has already happened and they've gotten themselves to a short list. So my personal advice is think about your cold email sequences as a way to build a relationship so you can end up on the short list when they're in the buying cycle. And then lastly, it does vary based on your market, what you're selling, what they need, how the buying process works. This is going to be a huge, huge opportunity for people as we go forward to, I think, build trust, but you can also burn bridges pretty fast. And PS now, if you have a terrible amount of emails, they can get screenshotted, thrown on Reddit, and that's the end of that. So let's not end up there. So you're constantly battling this volume versus effectiveness. So I just put this up here as an example. This is LinkedIn, but this is what we want to avoid. In this message, as a fractional professional, I'd like to explore potential insights. Would it make sense for us? Blah, blah, blah. No, I got 50 of these this morning. Absolutely not. If this person, I don't know who it was because I screwed out his name. If this person would have said, "Hi, Allie, I noticed that you're active in whatever. And based on my work with this client, I think that you'd enjoy some ideas about this client." That doesn't take a whole long time to write, but you got to have a methodology about it. So this, nope, decline. You might vary, but that's my belief. Here's some more ideas for you to use sequences. So again, if you're not using cold outreach and you're letting that sequences tool sit idle, no, it's not going to happen after today. These are some of the things you can do with it. So content nurture is going to be number one. Demo or meeting no show. This does happen. This happens whether you sell software or services. No shows are a great way to get them back in. Meeting follow up and nurture. So let's say, for example, I had a meeting this last week and we were supposed to meet this morning and it got pushed out a couple of weeks. So what I'm going to do is put this person into a sequence to just continue to stay in front of them with some additional content that's going to be relevant to the conversation we're having in 3 weeks. Because we were supposed to meet today, that got pushed. I don't want to wait 3 weeks for me to have myself in that inbox in a helpful and positive way. Re-engagement of marketing contacts gone cold. I'll show you some examples as we move into the actual tool because I did use this webinar as an opportunity to re-engage some of our contacts on our current newsletter list who had gone cold. Now, there isn't a huge lift here, but if you do this consistently over time, I do believe that you'll have folks that maybe initially jumped on the newsletter list and they went cold. In HubSpot, they're called unengaged, but they went unengaged because they didn't open emails for a while. Well, it's not because they didn't want to hear from you, or maybe your content wasn't relevant. We'll dig into that here in just a little bit, but this is a good use case. Unstuck deals or opportunities. So we do have a couple of folks that we've implemented what we would call like close the loop type sequences. Like everybody, every now and then you get ghosted. So use your sequences to make sure that they know that you're closing the opportunity. And if you close the opportunity, close the opportunity. Don't do this like I'm going away. I'm really going away. I am going away. Okay, that'll just land you on Reddit faster than I can say that. A new relationship nurture. So let's say that you have a bunch of folks that you met at a trade show and they're not ready for a meeting yet. Sometimes I think what happens is we push them into this, like, see if we can book a meeting with them. But what if they're not ready? What if they've expressed no intent or they're not the right decision maker? How do we use some of these sequences to send relevant content and invite them to an upcoming event, a conversion opportunity, so on and so forth? Podcast guest outreach is good if you happen to have a show, if you have a list of people that you want to get on your podcast, or if you have the need for you to get on someone's podcast. Webinar invites, I mentioned that one just now. We've been using that for our organization as well. And then for a lot of you, you may have gotten an email from me in the last couple of days that said, "Hey, you registered for this webinar. I would love to know what you're looking to learn." And so that was a sequence, but what was actually communicated was, I really want to know. And I did. I read every single one of them and I replied to all of you that had emailed me, I want to know what you want to learn in this webinar. This is a fantastic way to build trust with your audience. And I'm telling you what, I register for a lot of webinars because I want to see what's out there. And PS, a lot of them are terrible. Hopefully this one's good. But a lot of them are not, they're not doing this. They're not engaging me prior to the webinar. So I think that's one thing. Okay, so PS, real quick, commercial, we do webinars a lot. So if you are finding that you want to learn more about HubSpot and know what's kind of coming out all the time, Tyler's got a killer webinar every first Wednesday of the month. However, this one is happening actually in 2 weeks. So this one's going to be the last week in October because he's going to be at a HubSpot event, being all HubSpotty. So he's going to teach that the last week of the month. So that's over on our link here. And then I've heard from a lot of you that are like, you know what, I should be getting more out of HubSpot and I don't know where to start. One of the first places is to build yourself a dashboard of visible and business impact data. If you can't build that dashboard, that's opportunity number one. We're going to dive into how to tell that story with your executive team, or if you're an executive, how to make sure that you're using HubSpot to make data-driven decisions and what you might need to adjust or change in that in order for that to be more effective for you. All right, so let's dive into creating and using HubSpot sequences themselves. All right, so step 0. So I'm starting this before step 1 because really 0 is the purpose. You got to determine the who, to what context, and the purpose. So I've got this example of re-engaging newsletter subscribers. And if I overlaid this on top, the 5 steps to go through would be, what do we want to do? What is the background or context? What is our strategy? How do we stay relevant? And then what is our content and action requested? These 5 questions will help you tremendously as you put together your sequence. And the reason I'm harping on this so much is so many times we come in as consultants and we've gotten into the tool and it's kind of clear that the team got really excited about the tool and kind of haphazardly went in there and set some stuff up. but there really wasn't a strategy. It really wasn't, consistent across the org, or the tool just got really exciting and fancy and some stuff was set up. So this might be a way to think about this if we're wanting to re-engage newsletter subscribers. Maybe it's because the content they were getting wasn't relevant. So what should we do? Let's create a sequence that's specific to their industry. Let's see how we can segment that. And then what will we send them and what's the goal? Another way to think about this is, let's say you do want to secure more meetings from a very specific group of people. In this case, it might be marketing leaders who are wanting to plan for 2025. And in this case, we're going to need an offer. Sometimes you have to come up with a new offer, just like you do in a marketing campaign, to actually use in your sequences. How do I segment that in HubSpot? And then what's the goal? So this is going to be step 0. Now, what I love to do once I've got step 0 figured out, and this is where you guys, if you've come to webinars before, you know I love using AI. And this is where I love to, one, go to my chart and map things out. So the first thing I did is I went to, if you happen to use Lucid Chart, it's not awesome, but it's way faster than me doing this by hand. I can type into Lucid Chart, here's a diagram that I want, and here's my steps that I want. Again, this is fictitious just for purposes of example, but this is the fictitious diagram that I want. I threw this into their chart or their flow chart creator, and I got this, but I got it in a long chunk. And so literally 5 seconds, I just went and stuck it in 3 lines. But now I've got my diagram. And this diagram is important to take to the whole team and say, do we agree on this before I go and start building this in HubSpot? This single-handedly is a piece that if you do this well and you get buy-in here, you will understand, you know what? I actually have to go build this thing. I don't have this thing. What if we did this? Oh, this doesn't make sense. When you start to visually see how things are shaking out, you get a much better understanding of how to do it. Now, the cheat code that I like to do here is I like to take this diagram and then I'll drop this diagram into ChatGPT. Actually, let's go more step. Drop this into ChatGPT with a prompt about you're building a sequence, use the chart I provided, review what the sequence will include, blah, 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 and call out any assets that I'm going to need in order for me to create this sequence. So this is what ChatGPT then gave me. It gave me kind of a rundown of the bullet list. Okay, I don't like that very much. Like, I like that it gave me that, but it's not as actionable. So then my follow-up prompt was, hey, go ahead and put this into a table. Here's the columns that I want. And this is the table that I got of all the things I will need in order for me to build this sequence. This is the missing piece, I think, to the recipe that a lot of times we don't have. And even like people in my position, Alexa's position, Tyler, Will, whoever else on our team are asked to go build a sequence, but we don't have some of the understanding of things that are needed because we have to pull from what's there or create new. And this is where I think practices like this of, again, this, I use ChatGPT Pro, you could use other tools, but this practice of rolling back to, I actually have to build this out first. These are the things that I have to choose from. Like we mentioned earlier, this is what's in HubSpot. I'm going to use AI. I'm going to then build this in. So this brings us to the point where, as you saw on this previous slide, we're going to have to build some templates. Templates are the foundation of automated emails in HubSpot. You need to build those first. So if you go to build your sequence after today and you're like, woohoo, this is awesome, I love this, you're not going to find that it's that easy because you don't have templates first. So build your templates, and that's where you're going to come back to this piece where you're like, all right, I need a template here. Go build that email on the templates area, then come back to the sequences area. Okay. Now, step 2, determine the type of sequence that you want to create. So this is where we have starting from scratch or creating a dynamic sequence, which we're not going to go too much into today, but I'm going to talk about when to use that here in the bonus section. So when you start from scratch, you're going to name your sequence. And then again, you get these 6 different things you have to choose from. Now, a couple of things to think about is you do want to think about, what am I wanting to automate? How many steps? Again, back to your flow chart. And then what are the enrollment details? So I like to ask questions in the opposite, like, what would happen where somebody would get an email and be like, this, I said I don't want this, or I don't want to be in this, or let's say this happens a lot. Unfortunately, if it's not caught in advance, where an email is going out about pitching services, then the person buys the services and somehow they never get taken out of the sequence and they keep getting pitched the services. Happens all the time, but it shouldn't. So this is where you want to think about that. And if you don't know how to handle the unenrollment details, that's where you stop and say, okay, hey, I got to get someone to help me, and not just like, it's not possible, because it's probably possible. Either that or you're not paying for the things to make it possible. So what you can do in Pro is you can, so if I go back this here, we've got when they reply to an email, when they book a meeting, or if you wanted to use any of these automations in Pro, you could say if they submitted a form, it's like a demo form, a meeting form, whatever, or if they saw a certain page. Okay, that's a way to unenroll them in Pro. So once we got this set up, again, you're going to set up the different steps and you're going to enroll your contacts in HubSpot, and you can either enroll from your contact screen or you can move them here. When you actually get into the enrollment screen, this is what it looks like. So if you are new to sequences, this isn't something that you don't know about. But what I do find is it's rather easy if you're doing low numbers of enrollments. So let's say 50 as opposed to 500. You can go through here and actually personalize the first sentence of each one of those emails. That's going to be a little teeny trick to get you more opens and more engagement. A little bit of personalization goes a long way. Now, you can also enroll people in Gmail or Outlook. So this is my Outlook. I've got this pulled up and you've got like the bar just built right in the middle of your Outlook here. So if I wanted to have that sequence I just talked about where I met someone at an event as a sales professional and I wanted to enroll them into my nice to meet you, here's 5 emails sort of things dripped out, I could enroll them in a sequence right inside of my inbox. And then let's say I have the unenrollment trigger to be if they register for our webinar, or if they book a meeting with me, then they're out. Okay, that might be an option. So right from here, gives me the sequences, pops right up on my screen. And then I can choose to enroll them right into that here on in Google and Outlook. I'm not leaving my screen to go back to HubSpot. So what if you want to add people? So it's like, Allie, that's great, but that sounds like a lot of manual work and we're doing that already. Awesome. If you haven't trained your teams and you have Pro, if you haven't trained your teams how to use that consistently, that's probably an opportunity. But let's say you want to level up. I would love for everybody after this webinar, this doesn't happen because we don't have enterprise, but if everyone after this webinar was going to get a specific drip after this, okay, you can do this in enterprise. I love this. I'm so in love with this feature. Tyler, we need to eventually buy this, but this is in our test portal because we get access to enterprise. You can actually have someone, so let's say a call ended and you automatically enroll them in a sequence. This is what the power comes at the higher level. You can also choose to unenroll them from a sequence. But here, as you can see, you can also use a list membership. So if you think about the third-party tools that get into your HubSpot, so let's say you've got some API connection with a tool of your own, or you've got even this webinar. Like when someone comes to the webinar and watches all of the webinar, because of the way Zoom integrates with HubSpot, they get added to a list and then automatically enrolled in a very specific follow-up sequence. That's the power of this enterprise. But I can also choose to have it come from a person or a contact owner specifically. So this gives you some flexibility as well. So the last step is going to be analyzing, reviewing, and adjusting. So this is going to be your home base for looking at how your sequences perform. Now, a couple things to note here is if you have, this is a 2-step sequence, but if you have a 1-step sequence, you will actually see, figured this out this last week, you will actually see there's something called a response rate. And the response rate will be like no responses because the sequence ended before you actually got a response. So that's something we learned this week. But you can start to see when you do A/B testing, you can do A/B/C testing, A/B/C/D, and you can start to see the difference in opens, the difference in clicks. This one actually, more clicks on this one. Interestingly enough, the difference in this one here was this one had 2 calls to action, this one had 1. I don't really know if that made a difference, but interesting nonetheless. So the other piece I wanted to call out here was if you go in here looking for details, it automatically will give you results based on your personal profile in HubSpot. So if you're a marketing manager, sales manager, and you're not doing sequences and you're looking for sequence performance by your team, this has tripped people up before. It just X that out and you're going to see all sequences, not just yours. And then make sure you're monitoring this bounce rate because that's something that, again, will get you in trouble down the line. The other piece that's new is if you do have enterprise, there's now the ability to link deal outcomes to sequences. So do you want to know if sequences are affecting or impacting deals? Yeah, that's possible, but it's an enterprise feature. The other thing I wanted to point out is something that not a lot of people know, and that is that you can view the template performance. So I just showed you sequence performance, but you can actually view template performance at the individual email template level. And that's going to be over in templates, and you're going to pull down this view sales content analytics. And you can see this is actually what that looks like. So if I wanted to use this email to outside of a sequence, this is going to report on all of the activity on that email template, not just the sequence. So as you can see, our team is actually using templates to deliver our client weekly updates. And so this gives us some perspective on that as well. So just a key insight to think about. All right, so a few bonuses here would be the new dynamic sequences. So this is what it looks like if you haven't had a chance to dig in. Dynamic sequences, the goal here is A lot of times when we've worked with companies to set up a sequence, they're like, okay, I'm going to email, then I'm going to call, then I'm going to email, then I'm going to task, then LinkedIn. And there just isn't the bandwidth to do all of that stuff. So dynamic sequences give you the chance to send automated emails until there is an engagement. And then they move over into the second half of that string where you can then have more of the meticulous, like one by one, we call them sales led efforts as opposed to automated efforts. So, what this looks like is you would select your automated outreach. And then once you can set your signals to be like in your, I don't have this on the screen, but in the settings area and automate area, you set your signals and then you can set what those things need to be. So, this is a good way to kind of direct your sales reps to be like, listen, when somebody shows that they have interest, you're off the automation train in terms of emails, and you're on the automation train of being like assigned things to do, but they're one-to-one at that point, as opposed to automated. The other thing to think about is just because you have access to send automated emails doesn't mean you have to. So one thing that I like to do is you can assign what's called a manual email task. And that just means they get added to a task to send a manual email. And when this pops up in HubSpot, you actually can specify what email template you'd like to consider to have them use. This is a great way to solve the blank cursor problem where it's like, I don't know what to say, but they send an email. And then you can actually customize what you might want here based on I'm going to go ahead one here, based on any contact information, personalization tokens. But if I go back here, also, one of the things is you can set up specific task queues as well. So one way I've used this in the past is everyone that was part of a sequence for one of our clients got into this sequence, they got a manual task. And then when that email went out, it actually was a task that lived in a queue called conference follow-up. And that queue was something that the sales leader kept a very close eye on. So just a couple of things to consider here. Um, I know most of you who came here probably know this, but if you don't, we run a channel called HubSpot Hacks. There's lots of videos about sequences on that channel. So feel free to head over there. And then we've got You Asked, We Answer Sequences Edition because lots of questions. So I'm just going to tackle one or two, and then we'll dive into our questions in the Q&A. So number one, I'm struggling with using lists to populate the sequence, and a template email is part of a sequence. So I think we covered that one. When you do enroll folks into a sequence, you can only enroll 50 people at a time unless you have enterprise. So this might be where you're running into issues. So we're definitely happy to answer that offline if you want. We did talk about the sequence versus marketing. What's the best way to identify the group to send the sequence to? This is certainly like, go back to your question of like, what do I want to do? Who is it for? Why do they care? This should help with that. If you can't easily segment that, that's probably a data structure and HubSpot setup issue you're going to continually face. So certainly like probably get some time with us to talk through that. But I would say if it's hard to segment this and identify the group, it's usually a setup of structure case. Um, and then let's see here. I've got one more that I wanted to make sure I get to. How do I make sequences easy enough or simple enough for account reps to utilize? This is one piece where really having a strategy and training across the board is going to be important. Throwing people to the sequences tool with a quick video is a recipe for everybody kind of running amok. So highly recommend getting some training in there. So let's go into our questions we have in Q&A. And if we need to come back, we certainly can.